What's up, everybody? Soren Baker here on Unique Access, and today we are joined by Hi-Tek. Thank you for coming through, sir.
No problem, no problem.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, man, you know, it's a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah.
Me and Hi-Tek go back.
Yeah.
And for best albums, man, Hi-Tek has selected Dr. Dre's The Chronic.
Yes, sir.
And obviously one of the best rap albums ever made and released in 1992. So for you, Tech, obviously Dre had all of his success with World Class Wrecking Crew, with everything he did with Ruthless, and then he had done Deep Cover with Snoop leading up to The Chronic. So for you, seeing that evolution of his production leading into The Chronic, what were you kind of thinking or expecting for this project?
You know, to be honest, I think the album came as a surprise as a whole.
Okay.
Like, the approach with, what was it, the Deep Cover joint. Snoop's style was just totally different from any other West Coast artist that I had heard at the time.
Right.
But Dre, being that I've been listening to Dre's music since since like 7 years old, since World Class Wrecking Crew. And I've been a fan of Dre from a DJ standpoint.
Right.
And production, you know, and up into N.W.A. and everything. But The Chronic was just a testimony to what I wanted to be as a producer. You know, producer / rapper, you know, somebody like coming from the Pete Rock and Diamond D's, you know, Large Professor, the rapper / producer.
Producers on the mic.
Yeah, and Dre, being that I'm from the Midwest, Dre really displayed it from a real broad production standpoint. Like bringing artists, unknown artists to life. You know, people you never heard about, instant stars, just like that, you know what I'm saying? So, production, a lot of people think if you just because you like program a beat or play the instrument or made the drums, whatever, like you consider a producer, but you're not.
Right.
You know, Dre is a real producer.
So let's get into a couple of the tracks, because obviously Nothing But a G Thing was the one that really kicked off the album.
My favorite joint.
So explain, why is Nothing But a G Thing your favorite song on the album?
Man, I have no idea. I listen to Dre's, I go all the way back to like Straight Outta Compton. Everything he did with Cube when they was putting their brain together and you know, D.O.C. and all of that. There's nothing I could ever hear in Dre's production that was a mistake. Like everything was flawless. Like you can hear like a lot of guys' albums and producers, like now the more you get into music, you can dissect certain things, but you can't dissect Dre's production. Like he's his mixes always was on point.
Right, and I think to your point, on the production side, he really showed that at that time rap had gone from like super heavy sampling, the James Brown era, the breakbeat era, and then obviously with Above the Law and EPMD and MC Breed, we were starting to get some of the funk was getting more and more prominent. But then with Dre, I think on The Chronic, and Nothing But a G Thing's a good example of this, how he had the real separation of the tracks.
Right.
To where everything was super clear and clean.
And along with the rawness at
but
the
it had
same
the
time.
bottom.
Yeah, it had the bottom. The drums was still raw. And reintroducing George Clinton in the Parliament to kids that never really had heard it. And even me being a kid that grew up around it, like, you know, that music is from, that's where I'm from.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I grew up around the corner from Bootsy Collins.
I
so,
know.
You know, my thing is, you know, how he was able to bring that back to the forefront and reintroduce it to people, and not just hip hop in general, you know, to the world.
And then, you know, Dre Days, obviously another really big song. And with that one, what I thought was cool is that, you know, we see that Dre had obviously, when he was with N.W.A, he had the beef with Cube, but then Dre Day, he and Snoop were like going at a bunch of people. And one thing that I always thought that Dre did that he doesn't get a lot of credit for is him being such a good rapper. And I thought like on Dre Day, like he normally does, especially in that era, he was like real husky, real muscular vocally, and real strong. So for you as a producer, like, did you remember anything specific about that song, production-wise or vocally, that stood out?
Yeah, production-wise, like, I like the video, like along with the production, like it was something about the way those drums sound, and cause it was like dry. It was like really the drums were really broad, but dry at the same time. Dry meaning not a bunch of reverb, not a bunch of
right.
But just the whole layout, it was just like clean gangster hip hop at its purest form. Clean meaning like you can't even dissect any mistakes in the production. You can't say, oh, I heard a clip in the vocal, or I heard the loop wasn't right, or
Right.
But mixing live instruments with drums coming from the MPC 60. I mean, and the mixes, like I said, the mixes was crazy.
Right. And I also thought that Stranded on Death Row, for instance, and Lyrical Gangbang, those songs obviously didn't have videos and they weren't singles, but at the same time, at that point, gangster rap in particular, and West Coast rap specifically, other than really Ice Cube, I don't think people respected lyrics from the West Coast at the time. And I think that The Chronic really showed, like, not only does the West Coast have lyrics, but here's like a whole crew of dudes that have lyrics.
I mean, come on, man. Like, to be honest with you, I think Cube is still underrated.
I agree.
As being one of the best lyricists in hip hop.
Top 5
ever.
Easy.
I mean, come on, man. Cube is really, him and Nas are like neck and neck, if you ask me. I mean, he's one of the greats. Like,
right.
Nas is one of my favorite MCs. Just with their precise knowledge on what they're rapping about at the time, they paint a picture so vivid.
Right.
And it's hard, and still without. It sounds like it's like effortless. You know what I'm saying? But Cube, I mean, come on, man. Come on. Ice Cube.
I know. And I think that coming from all the great work Dre had done, I think he was able to apply that kind of to the, the Death Row family / the Dogtown group of artists.
I think so too. And I think what Dre and Cube were able to do together, along with D.O.C. and everybody else, that was a part of that chemistry. Dre was able to produce himself vocally.
And being that you later worked with Dre on Aftermath and did a lot of stuff with the G-Unit crew and everything, for you, like, how, looking back at The Chronic, and since he had so many different artists on it, and being around that kind of crew and seeing how Dre works, like, why and how do you think Dre's able to execute having, Corrupt, Daz, D.O.C, Snoop, Lady of Rage, all those people, RBX, on one album, and himself, of course, being the lead rapper? How do you think he's able to orchestrate and make that work so well?
I mean, I think at the time he's just capturing the energy of the world at the time. He's so much of a fan, and not a fan of music and all the music that came before him. So I believe he's just in his zone, and he feeds off of young energy.
Okay.
He feeds off the young artists, and us as producers, we can't do it without those artists.
Right.
We look at those artists as instruments, basically. They're like an extra instrument. Like, they're like another saxophone, a piano.
Right.
And then here comes these vocals and these pictures that they paint. And you got somebody like Cube or Snoop, you're able to work with these guys. Like, Dre's just a blessed dude. You know what I mean? And,
most definitely.
And he's a doctor, man. He's a surgeon. So he lays these people out on the operating table and do what he do.
Well, he had surgery with World Class Record Crew in the Formula video.
Oh man, yeah,
Remember
he did
the Formula video?
Oh man, I loved it. Yeah, that was the first album I ever bought. Like
the D.O.C?
No, the World Class Record Crew.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So then, with the Chronic 2, one thing I thought was interesting that Cube had brought out Yo-Yo, but what we hadn't seen a lot of with gangster rap or hardcore rap was having a woman. So what do you think Lady of Rage added to the Chronic?
I mean, I think it added balance, and she was spitting, man. She was just spitting just as hard as any dude on the album, you know what I'm saying? And you gotta have a lady soldier in the camp. You gotta have one, you know what I'm saying? Everybody needs one, and they're hard to find, because a lot of females, they kind of shy off from being intimidated around all those guys. But when they come, and then for them to actually like hit it and start competing with the dudes neck and neck like what Nicki was doing. I think, you know, she found her voice and she learned how to project her voice on the mic. That's why she's winning. Okay. But Rage was the same way. You know? Right. You're around those dudes, like if you're around and you come from like, you know, you're around people like Dre and Snoop and Corrupt and Daz, I mean, you can't do nothing but be dope.
Yeah. And then the Chronic obviously is very gangster driven, but it also has like the little Ghetto Boy song and the day the brothers took over. So with those two in particular,
and Bushwick Bill was on the album.
Bushwick Bill's on the album. Yeah. So it had, even though it was very street, very gangster, very rough, it also had a little bit of social commentary. Yeah. So for you, being that you worked with such a diverse group of artists throughout your career, what do you think having those two songs on the Chronic in particular added to the project?
I think that's what gangster rap is missing today. I mean, I think, you know, coming from Dre and, I mean, I grew up listening to Ghetto Boys. I mean, we used to play the Ghetto Boys like crazy. You know what I mean? You know, I mean, that whole album, we played it back to back. Well, the second album, technically. Yeah. That was my favorite album.
On Another Level?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what gangster rap is missing, man, is the social commentary. I think all the glorifying and, I mean, it went from telling the story to like actually glorifying the stories. Right. And I think that's the difference between that type of gangster rap. And people can say, oh, well, y'all did it back in the day. Well, you know, you had Too Short and Cube and Sebo and, you know, you had all these guys who really loved music at the same time. Right. It wasn't really, to me, it wasn't really ever about glorifying the streets. It was about telling the story.
And explaining it too.
And explaining it in an artistic way.
Right.
So they cared about how it sounds in the story, and then they put these interludes and the sound effects with it. And like Cube, you listen to his first 3 albums, I mean, they're nothing but stories. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think he was actually glorifying it. It was done in an artistic way. I think people started taking it a little too serious, and that's where the ignorance comes from.
Well, that's another story for another day.
Yeah.
But anyway, we appreciate you coming through Hi-Tek
no problem,
on this episode.
Man. Thanks for having me.
This episode of Best Albums is Hi-Tek. I'm Soren Baker, Unique Access, and make sure you pick up Dr. Dre The Chronic. Don't be late.